I'll be turning 34 this year. 34. It still feels strange to wrap my head around that. I mean, I still remember when I was just 15 years old playing AAA hockey, and at that time still believed that I would play in the NHL one day. But by the time I turned 18, I began to settle for the idea of college hockey. And then after I was sent packing from my junior team for missing curfews and breaking some of the rules off the ice, I returned home with my tail between my legs and resigned myself to what I considered to be a life of mediocrity and started working full-time in my family's coffee shop business. From there, I continued to make mistakes in my personal life, and I watched as every single vision I once held for myself fall apart right in front of me. Married and starting a family by 25? No. A millionaire by 30? No. I became increasingly isolated and more dependent on substance abuse and women and video games to escape reality or to feed my ego and feel like a man. Throughout my 20s, though, I continued to play pickup hockey from time to time. I took a boxing class for a week here and a week there. I picked up CrossFit for a month and jiu-jitsu for a month. I guess fitness has always been the one thing that has comforted me over the years and made me feel good about myself. But in reality, I was unable to commit to anything or bring myself to compete with others again, let alone myself. I found that I was just traveling in endless cycles of momentary motivation, maybe just enough productivity to appease my ego and take the edge off of my feelings of uselessness and inadequacy. One of my greatest weaknesses is that I don't put my all into anything. I was always that guy who could just coast at 80% effort and still finish well above average. And that time and time again has been that thorn, one of the thorns in my side, not applying myself, not preparing for important events, not putting my best foot forward, hoping for opportunities to find me, for friends to knock on my door, plagued by the fear of trying and failing or succeeding and then actually having to change my life and take on more responsibility and expectation. Question is it too late for me now that I'm in my 30s? Should I just throw in the towel and chalk my life up to just another forgettable existence? Sure, maybe it's too late for me to play professional hockey or to be a millionaire before 30. Those ships have sailed, but I've also found that driving through life while staring at the world through my rear view only ends in collisions. What am I doing any of these things for anyways? External validation? Because I expect that I should be further ahead? Because I believe that since I can't provide the life I'd like to be able to for everyone that I care about, that it must mean that I'm some sorry excuse for a man? That if I don't become someone of great importance and recognition, that my entire life has been a failure? Why do I believe those things? Why do I believe that on one hand I am above average, formidable even, under most circumstances, while on the other hand that I am inadequate and I will never measure up? I don't have all the answers. But what I do know is that I despise when I am not the best at something. I like to avoid feeling vulnerable, which does not make me some sort of enigma, as I'm sure that most of us relate to that on some level. But I have a confession, and it feels kind of ridiculous to admit this out loud, let alone on the internet, but I've wanted to compete in jiu-jitsu for over a decade, but I haven't because what I wanted more than that was to continue to feel safe and comfortable and not put myself in a position to fail or to lose again. It has taken me 10 years. 10 years to stop making excuses about time constraints or other priorities. 10 years to get so sick of watching myself walk in circles that I finally decided to just let go of control and allow myself to do something that I've always wanted to do. Besides, I can't be on here talking to you guys about courage and getting uncomfortable and self-development and involving yourselves in community and pushing yourselves to become a better version of yourselves if I am not leading by example. This is probably the most vulnerable post I've ever made for one reason above all, and that is because I have a white belt in jiu-jitsu. I have honestly felt embarrassed by this for years, and I know how ridiculous it might sound. When I was first introduced to jiu-jitsu in my early 20s, I was more okay with being a beginner back then. Plus, I was at a no-gi class, so no one was wearing a belt, and I loved it. There is nothing that has felt more freeing than wrestling and boxing and Muay Thai. I loved how during those classes and sparring, how the whole world just seems to disappear. I couldn't think about any of the other problems in my life other than the one problem right in front of me trying to punch me in the face or choke me out. But like everything else in my life, I quit before I could get ahead or take it seriously. And the real tragedy is that I've noticed that dynamic play out as a parallel in every other area of my life, from my career to my relationships. But those are stories for other times. When it comes to jiu-jitsu, my brain tells me that I should have been practicing and training and competing this whole time, that by now I should be a black belt and that I should have won tournaments along the way. I've beaten myself black and blue internally over this for years. And as I've been thinking about it, the feeling very much reminds me of how I failed as a hockey player as well. Why do I struggle so deeply with self-sabotage? Maybe the last thing I've wanted is to believe that I could be something special again, or to feel like the people closest to me are proud of me for something and are watching me, and I'm afraid to disappoint them. To feel like I'm talented at something again, and then in the end, not be good enough. It actually took the relationship with my youngest brother, who had been fighting demons of his own in his life, to motivate me enough to start training. I guess I had to find a why bigger than my fears and my ego. Long story short, we took off to Thailand for a month to get away from everything and train together. Now, I didn't fully realize that feeling of embarrassment in my ego until I began training again, lining up at the beginning of class next to people who have far more experience than I. But even more so when I entered my first competition after I returned home to Canada, which went a little something like this. Now, I'm going to share some footage of both a win and my loss, starting, of course, with the good news first.
It's just submission for you now, Levi. Paint your knees, paint your knees, paint your knees. Remember, paint your knees, go, go. Yes, excellent.
And now, the bad news. So since there was no one in my weight class of 205, I ended up fighting in the next weight class up, which was 216 plus. And despite my best effort, I was bested in the final after my opponent took me down and then proceeded to hold me in a very solid side control for the duration of the match. 260 pounds is quite the obstacle when it's on top of you and you have no clue how to escape. It was an extremely humbling experience for me, and you best believe Coach had me practicing how to escape side control all week after that. I honestly laid awake at night thinking about it for days, no joke. My coach also told me that it's those moments of failures and mistakes that build your foundation the most. You will always remember the thing that got you, and the next time that you face it, you will be ready. Maybe the problem is I haven't put myself into enough intentional moments of exposure to fear and failure to build true strength of character and competence and confidence. I have had such a hard time with feeling like I needed to give up on competing, especially now that I'm in my 30s, but maybe not everything needs to be about external competition and comparison and validation. Maybe there is room to compete with the man in the mirror, because I am sick of living in a place of thinking about all of the things that I could have been or should have been or would have been if I would have started earlier, or if I would have done this, or had I done that, or if I had that. I'm sick of making excuses. That is why I decided to share this story with you today, because I think it serves as a powerful metaphor or case study for life, and I think it can be applied to just about anything. I want you to know that it is never too late to try something new or face something scary. You don't get to choose the cards that you were dealt, but you get to choose how you're going to play them. And you playing small is a slap in the face to the life that you have been given. I want you to think about this as well. Sometimes you are facing a giant in your life that you're not ready for, like the boss of the level, and you haven't built enough in your character and in your skill set to be able to take it on. And you feel like you don't have time for these side quests or some of these other things that seem less important than this thing that you need to face. But what you actually need to do is to take on these other smaller challenges and side quests in order to build the character that you need to take on the giant that you are facing. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense, but I really hope that this can plant seeds in your heart that you will nurture and grow, because I can only bring a horse to water. As for me, I will be competing again this year, and I will win first place. And if I don't, I will enjoy the ride and build community and learn more about myself along the way, but I'm going to win. Mark my words, and I look forward to updating you. Feel free to follow along.